So tonight we are working on this Honda Civic that's behind me. It's a 2019 and it's actually one of our family friends. He decided to bring it to me to have it checked out for a vibration while driving. So apparently the either oil change place or tire place told him that he might need some axles or something to that extent. They really didn't know what it was going to need in order to rectify the vibration while driving. And off camera yesterday, I drove it. I put some miles on it, and I was able to feel a slight vibration, mostly in the seat area while driving. Steering wheel didn't shake. I didn't hear any noises with it, but I don't think I got it up to speed and for a long duration of time, meaning holding it constant so I can try to feel where it's coming from. So I don't know exactly where it's coming from. Again, the steering wheel does not shake. Felt it more around the seat area. But nonetheless, all these suspension noises and vibrations and stuff like that are always hard to pinpoint and diagnose accurately. So I guess we're kind of just going to take it step by step, see if we can find out what the problem is. Okay, so obviously if we're going to perform a visual inspection, we want to see if we can find anything that just stands out or jumps right out at us, like a bent control arm or anything like that. But there's nothing really as far as a standout thing that jumps out, nothing crazy underneath. Arms and stuff seem to look okay. And as far as the axles, nothing crazy there, just visually. Again, we're just looking at them visually. It does look like possibly at one point this one inner boot was leaking or is still the one that is leaking. So actually, it looks like it is currently the one that is leaking. So let's see. Yep, right there. The boot is torn. So we're going to keep that in mind. Again, we're looking for a vibration deal. And this is the two-piece with the half shaft, which you can see some grease coming out of that bearing area. Again, things to keep in mind. But suspension and struts and stuff, nothing crazy. And then the next thing I always do is check for bent rims. And the way that I do it is I like to get sort of in this point of view area and look at this portion here while spinning it. So if you keep your eye there, let me see. I don't know if the camera can pick this up well. Well, this rim has a bend in it. Now if we look at this rim here, this one has a bend in it as well. It's hard to tell on camera. And then this rim here, there. So this one is bent pretty good. And I believe this is the only straight one, the left rear. Yeah, so. Okay, so As far as visual inspection, nothing too crazy. Couple axle boots or axle boot and bearing up front. 1, 2, 3 rims bent, one straight one. So whether the rims being bent is what's causing it, I don't know. It didn't feel like a bent rim, but we clearly have 3 bent rims. As far as the severity, it looks like this one was the worst. Those two are about the same. Nonetheless, they are bent, so things to consider. So my next thing is I want to try to do a little bit of an experiment. Basically, I want to try to find or isolate or find an area of the source of the vibration. So we know we've got 3 bent rims. We've got a axle boot on the left side front that is torn, and we've got the bearing grease coming out of the half shaft on the passenger side and the front. So it's kind of, as far as visually trying to determine, we don't know. So what I want to do and try is I'm going to hook up my chassis ears to all 4 corners, drive down the road to make the vibration occur, and first and foremost see if I can isolate it from front to back, and then from left to right, or if it's only in one corner, I want to try to be able to find it. So I'm going to do all 4 corners, see if I pick up any vibration on any of them, or a front or back deal. So let me get set up for that, and then we'll take a test drive. Okay, so I'm all set up on all 4 corners. And just to get you a quick shot, again, I'm just starting with the corners and going from there. I'm secured well. I checked the routing. I've turned the wheel lock to lock. Nothing is in the way. So those are the fronts, and then I'll get you a shot of the rear. There we go. So pretty much on the hubs of all the wheels, again, I'm at 4 corners, looking for the biggest vibration capture and going from there. Okay, so I'm set up with the scope and the chassis ears connected. Got all 4 channels going. I think I've got them set up to where it's front left, front right, right rear, left rear. So I'll go ahead, try to get on the long stretch and see if I can capture anything. Okay, so I went driving last night, as I showed, after getting everything initially set up. It is now the next morning after I drove it for a while. I had to get on the highway to try to have some good space and area to learn when the vibration occurred. And basically, I got it down to where I can duplicate it. And it has to be right between 55 and 60 miles an hour. And it's off, or it's under acceleration. So if I just let off the throttle and cruise, it won't vibrate at that speed. But once you hit the accelerator and you start to, I guess, demand and get the engine going, vibration occurs. So I'm set up now, and I've added a 5th channel. I'm tapped into the pedal position sensor to help visualize when I'm on and off the throttle, and hopefully we can capture something there. Okay guys, so what I've pulled up here is one of the waveforms that I captured. One thing to understand is I did a ton of driving, a ton of waveform captures, trying to understand, capture, and see what was going on, and it took a lot of work to be able to do that and come up with basically a decision. But the main thing to take away is that I was able to use this to capture activity at one of the corners, which was my main goal. I wanted to use this setup for the first time with a known customer actual physical vibration that's felt. And so I decided to pull the scope out because I was curious to see if we could see it on the scope. And so just like any other diagnostics that we do with the chassiers and stuff, remember the main thing of those, the primary job and stuff is to capture noise, but they can capture vibration. So a side note that I learned with this was you want to pick a good, smooth, basically quiet road because the chassiers will pick up any bumps and cracks and gravel, rough gravel, and it'll make it difficult to find vibrations or something if you're capturing multiple noises during the driving. So if any of you guys are ever going to want to endeavor into any of this type of testing, pick a good, quiet, smooth road. What worked best for me was a decent stretch of kind of back road that was recently blacktopped, fully smooth, and just going straight, I was able to get the quietest, cleanest waveform. And I'll show you that later after some of these, and it's going to be clear as day. So right now, these are a little bit of a rough-ish road, but enough to be able to see something. And again, this is going to be always make sure to take notes because things can get confusing once you start adding a lot of stuff. So I believe I explained in the video, but front left is blue, channel 1. Front right is red, channel 2. Right rear, green, channel 3. Left rear is yellow, channel 4. So that's the order that I've got them in. And then this type of basically diagnosis when using the chassis, there's not any type of a known factor or something you're looking for with any of all these testings. You're just looking for basically the greatest level of activity, amplitude, any of that sort compared to other channels that you're also capturing. And so basically you're looking for the odd man out. And a good example here is the blue is, let's call it sort of narrow and, straight. The yellow is basically the same. Green looks to have a little bit more of a wider capture, but the red is your odd man out. It's the largest out of all of these. And so keep in mind, we are on all four corners on our basically knuckles, spindles, whatever you want to call it. So we're the furthest point on our axles area of the vehicle. And so whatever activity is happening, that's where we're capturing our data from. And so here on this red channel, I had to learn how to create the vibration. And basically it was under acceleration at around about 50 to 55 miles an hour. If as soon as I let off the pedal, at that same speed I could cruise, the vibration goes away. As soon as you get on the pedal to accelerate again, in that speed range, the vibration would come. One thing, and it's kind of hard, but follow me here, you can sort of see this, let's call it bubble, and then it narrows down, and then it bubbles, and then it kind of narrows down and stays straight. These two sections here were points where I was accelerating, I let off, accelerating, and let off. It was hard to take, with all the captures I was taking, and finally understanding how to recreate it, and then trying to save the correct capture. It was a lot of driving, a lot of capturing, a lot of waveforms, a lot of thumbing through them. But again, I was learning how to try to capture this well. So that's an area right there of vibration. And to get a little bit better of detail, if you're wanting to find out if you are 100% capturing good data, the more we zoom, and let me bring the blue into here, and I'll bring up the yellow. I mean, right there alone is clear as day as to where we are having greater activity, let's call it. And we don't have any, let's call it wheel bearing noise, tire noise, or any of that. We are physically feeling a vibration. So that is what we are actually seeing and capturing is vibration. And you can see that we are actually graphing it out. There is an odd man out that is coming up from the chassis attached to all four spindles. Okay, so based off of those two scope captures, I'm going to go ahead and basically swap side to side, go down the same road, same way, see if anything changes. So I've got all four down, still in their respective position. But what I'm going to do is slightly mark the two right side wheels. Just to make sure we don't get confused with anything. But I will be keeping them in the same axle, meaning rears in the rears, front in the front, just swapping side to side. Okay, here we go, driver's side. And there we go, driver's side, rear. Okay, so now we'll take a test drive after swapping the wheels over. And what we are looking for is for these two to change to these two. And so again, I'll go here in this section to show you. And again, it's clear as day. And it looks like it's a bigger vibration point that we're capturing is the way that this signal is being created. It's coming up greater level than what it was in this first area. So this here alone, again, is showing us vibration or activity that we know is vibration because we can feel it. And again, red channel, which again is the front right. Okay, so one of the things that I ended up doing, I think as I explained in the video, to try to help it make it easier for, I guess, both you and I to try to understand or see when I was on the throttle or accelerating, I ended up tapping into the throttle accelerated pedal sensor, which is in purple. And as the voltage travels up, that's when I was accelerating, holding it, and then let off, just cruising. When this is all the way at the bottom, that's me not on the pedal at all. And this is when I pick back up. Again, I was trying to do it in different areas, but it helped to try to pick that section of data and just to be able to compare. Again, just an added thing to try to help find it as I was driving and capturing. And so if we go here and look at, again, the red, as even just from this section to even in this area. So this was the cruising. It's kind of smaller-ish areas. In this, as soon as we start accelerating, which here we are fully holding it at that steady speed, these, let's call them blobs, section of blobs are just way more pronounced than compared to these before we were accelerating. And you'll see that a little bit more clear as we go down the line under the acceleration. And again, especially compared to the others, the red is just way more pronounced, and we can go a little bit deeper. And we can see clearly how this activity, it's way more repetitive in that section, and obviously let's call levels or amplitude for sure compared to these guys is greater. But again, vibration, activity, repetitiveness, we are capturing. If you even, let's say, this section right here, look at the yellow, how it's kind of, it's a little bouncy, but it's sort of straight. This one's got a little bit of up down, and this one again, kind of like the yellow. If you remember which wheel this is, which is the right rear, that's also the one that had the worst bend. So I can understand, or I think that's why we see even here some of this repetitive vibration activity being captured. But it's still not even in comparison to this red channel of a multitude of times of data that we're capturing here physically as we are feeling it, as we're still holding the acceleration. And as we can continue going down the line, here's another big crazy portion there. Again, compared to the others, way more activity on the red. Okay, so after going over the scope captures that I showed, and just based off of how it felt and seeing everything on the red channel, which points to the right side, I decided to make a call and go ahead and order and replace the right side axle. Okay, and so what I have here is a small collection of axles, and I think there's actually one that's missing. But so quickly to go over this story or reasons why there's so many axles is I decided to replace the right side axle with this guy here. It's an aftermarket unit. It was readily available, and so I decided to make a call, throw this in, test drive it, see if there was any difference. And to no avail, same problem was there. So just to eliminate the fact that it was an aftermarket axle, I wanted to get that last bit of questioning out of my head and decided to source a true Honda axle, which for some reason on this particular model was very difficult to find the correct part numbered axle. This was a Honda axle. It was one of the wrong ones. There was differences in this shaft size, differences in this length, differences in cups. So it was very hard to finally locate the correct one. Installed the Honda axle, and same thing. Vibration was still on the right side. And so things just start to get very frustrating and difficult, and just a pain in the rear because everything is showing right side, right side, right side. You feel it, you see it on the capture, everything points to the right side. I started to think about possibly that intermediate shaft that has a bearing where you saw grease coming out, wondering if that could be causing it, possible rotor, so on and so forth. But I just didn't want to go that route, especially because the intermediate shaft was, I think, above $500. The rotor, to me, at this point, just did not make any sense. And so just before giving up, throwing my hands up in the air and saying, I don't know what it is, which I typically don't ever do. It's just not my persona. I decided to do a Hail Mary and for some funky oddball reason replace the left side axle, which is the one that, yes, we saw with the small tear, and decided to just source one. Again, Honda axle was problem finding, getting, locating, especially in a timely manner, if it was even available. So I went with an aftermarket one, which was the same style as this, just left side. And after the test drive, the vibration went away. And so it appears that in this axle, and it's hard to capture on camera, hopefully you hear that. Yes, I know axles will have some joint play and so on and so forth, but I guess on this one, it's enough of a wear inside for there to be enough of a situation that it will create a vibration on this inside cup. Okay, and so in order to try to explain the cause of the vibration and why it was felt on the right side and seen and captured on the right side, as far as how my train of thought and how I'm theorizing this. So that axle cup is inserted and splined right into the transmission, which is then directly splined onto the differential, which on the other end of the differential, we've got a directly splined, installed, connected intermediate shaft that is solid piece, which then goes out to the passenger side where we have another direct spline connection for the axle shaft. At that point, we do have some of those CV joints. But from the beginning, that inside cup is basically directly being connected inside the transmission with differential over to the right side. And so my whole mindset and thought about how this whole happened and how the scope captured everything on the right side, on the right front wheel, was now we have that where in the cup, the inside cup, and then with the shaft. And there's enough play there that when we accelerate, and get torque for the transmission to spin at that specific speed of the miles per hour, that amount of play there rotating at that speed creates a vibration. And so the joint is vibrating, causing vibration in the cup as it's rotating and spinning as we spin it with acceleration. And so the vibration then travels onto the right side through the direct coupling of that cup. So the cup is vibrating at that speed under torque, and it just sends the vibration and it travels along with that speed. The resonance of the vibration just kind of like funnels outwards, and it becomes greater from its originating point, which is that cup, and it just travels and resonates over to the right side, which is being captured at the end point of it, where it's just being flung the most out of balance, let's call it, because that resonance of vibration just traveled, and it's at its greatest point where it funneled out on that outer wheel. And so I believe that's why we are capturing it over there on the right side. Now, if you remember, we are attached on the furthest ends on both hubs or spindles. So the furthest point, we are directly coupled there towards the center in the transmission, and the vibrations traveling this way. That's why we didn't capture any vibration on the driver's side, because the vibrations in that cup, and it travels that way. And that once we let off of torque request and we're just rolling, where there's no acceleration movement from the tranny, again, there was play in the joint from the shaft and then the cup that houses where those two meet, there's enough play where if we're just rolling, they're kind of in unison because not one is moving more than the other. As soon as we request torque, now one is moving against, not really against, but not so much in unison because there's play. And when there's that difference and enough space within the cup and the shaft joint, and we request torque, there's that play, and then at that speed, under torque request, is where we get that imbalance that just, again, it cones out, and it travels and sends it out at that perfect speed, again, under torque request. And so in this case, if you remember, we started off with, which I did not know, with 3 bent wheels. And then we are told that possibly the situation is being caused by axles. So the scope's job was to first and foremost differentiate if we have a wheel imbalance or a corner that's out of balance creating the vibration. And once I captured that first data and started realizing that we're finding and seeing something on that right front, I kind of got past the fact that we did have 3 bent rims, which was kind of counterintuitive. When someone first, if they bring you a vibration complaint and you see 3 bent rims, I mean, it's kind of first step would be to say, hey, we can't do nothing because you've got 3 bent wheels. You need to get that taken care of before we continue forward because it could be from that. Now, I didn't want to make that decision or call or tell them to go ahead and take care of the wheels by either purchasing or fixing, repairing, whatever, swapping. You can imagine the cost of that, and then to still have a vibration. That would have been just a big setback, and that's what I was wanting to avoid by using the scope. And so once we saw it all on the right side, or let's call it specifically to a single corner, then I knew I can get past the fact that we've got 3 bent wheels, and it was undeniable because of the data that we captured. And so with that, the whole purpose was try to learn from the situation. I wanted to see what I could capture, what I could gather, what I could see, what I could come up with. I don't know if there's any other way that this could have been found without basically doing the Hail Mary and before you give up, trying that left side axle. And I did it without knowing what was going to happen because we never saw anything there on the left side. But it was an interesting one. It's one that makes you think, and it keeps you on your toes. And again, I don't claim to be a super great, whatever you want to call it. Putting myself out there. I learned from this one. Putting it out there also so you guys can learn. And we all do make mistakes. But ultimately, I did end up, I guess, getting the issue rectified. As I said in the beginning, this is one of our family members' vehicles, so I did not want to make incorrect calls and spend money where you didn't have to, or run around of getting this fixed, that fixed, so on and so forth. So the whole purpose of spending this whole time and devoting all the effort and so on and so forth was to try to avoid any mistakes and issues and so on and so forth. So hopefully Eli, the owner, is happy with the way it runs, drives, and no more vibration. And I hope to still be able to come to the family barbecues and not be talked bad upon while being out there. So with that, I hope you learned something. I know I certainly did. It was a cool one, very frustrating, time consuming, but the end goal was pretty cool to learn how all this crazy stuff happens. But Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming along. And that's all on this one.